it may be it comes down to those words, how does it feel? Because that's a question that everyone is asked at different times in their life, and that they have to ask themselves. And the song, you know, threatens you in a way. And it says, how does it feel? How does it feel to be doing what you're doing right now? Do you feel really alive? Do you feel this is what you ought to be doing with your life? Are you sure? You know, the song challenges you, whoever you are, all the time, whenever it arrives. And that's where Dylan puts the most heart into those lines. It is the first time he sings those lines in the third chorus that, for me, that's where the song just explodes, where he has brought so much more to those words than he has the first two times, or than he will again. It's just frightening, and you can't lie. I think maybe that's it. You know, the chance that people have to sing that out loud. You know, when this book was first published in the United States last spring, maybe the first radio interview I did was with a show in Minneapolis, and I'm on the phone in Berkeley in California, and waiting for my turn on this show in Minneapolis. And they have a commercial, and it's a self-help show. You know, it's all about how to make yourself a better person, and what products will help your skin, and things like that. And I'm listening to the commercials and the announcements of who'll be on the show next week and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the wrong show for me to be on. And then they play Like a Rolling Stone, which is one reason I love doing radio and TV interviews, because they always play the song and I always get to listen to it. So they play Like a Rolling Stone, and I'm supposed to just sit there for 6 minutes while it plays, which I'm happy to do. Yeah, man, I'm hearing what's going over the air live, being broadcast, and every time the chorus comes up, you hear this female voice singing along with the song, totally out of tune, really loud, and you know, having a wonderful time. And so then the host of the show comes on after the record's over, and she said, I had no idea that was going out over the air, that everybody could hear me singing, but I just couldn't help myself. And you know, it's that part of the song that demands that people not sing along, sing it for themselves. I wrote the book before I was able to listen to the tapes of the whole recording session.
The last chapter.
Yeah. And I always knew that was how the book would end. I mean, I was told you'll be able to listen to the whole session, but it took a long time for them to find the tape and put it in shape where I could listen to it. And so I didn't arrive until I was almost finished with the whole book. So I'd written the whole middle part of the book about the sound of the song and how it feels as if it's happening right as you listen, and it feels as if it couldn't be repeated. It feels like an event. It feels unstable. It feels as if people, yeah, it feels as if people don't know where they're going. They don't know how to get from one place to another in the music. And so it was kind of surprising to listen to the recording session and find out that, just as a matter of fact, that was completely true. That they didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what they were doing. When they get all the way through the song for the first time, well, even before that, there's an amazing moment when Mike Bloomfield, who's explaining the song to the different musicians, and you know, the way the tempo's going to work and the way the keys are going to change and all of that, he says, okay, so that's what happens with the second chorus. And then he says, I don't know what happens after that. So even he who has rehearsed the song with Dylan has never gone past the second verse. What's so shocking, when you listen to them finally play all the way through the song, is you realize that once they get past the second verse, which they have played up to that point a couple of times, and the first day, second day, they get all the way through the second verse and then they stop or somebody makes a mistake or whatever. When they get into the third verse, you realize no one's ever been here before. None of the musicians, not Bob Dylan, no one's ever been there. They don't have any idea what's coming. The musicians don't even know how many verses the song has. Could have 6. They don't know. No one's told them, they have not worked out how to end it because they haven't gotten anywhere near the end. Now normally, when you are recording a song, even if it's a very long song, when you finally get through it, that just means you have some sense of what you're going to be doing. It's just the roughest rehearsal. And say, okay, don't play so long on that part, Joe, and Fred, just come on a little stronger on that part. And that's when you work all those things out. But that's not what happened here. They get all the way through the song, and then they go right back to continue to try to play it. They have no idea
What impressed
that
me
this is the only time they're ever going to record it.
Sure.
I realized, as I'm listening to this tape, this great sense of suspense builds up and fear that even though, we know they did record the song just that one time, that's the version that was released, but you get the feeling they're never going to do it. It's not going to happen. And then once they have gotten all the way through and they keep playing and they keep trying, and you hear the song beginning to slip away from them. They are losing it. They're losing the rhythm. Dylan is getting bored. It begins to go soft. It gets flabby. And it's too late now. If they hadn't gotten it that time, probably, I think, they would have not ever recorded it. And Dylan would have taken some of the lines from that song and put them in some other song, and that would be that. A lot of things are going on. These are people who are bored and they need a way to kill time. For all we know, they just might have wanted to get away from their wives or girlfriends and have a boys' club. That's how Rick Danko would describe those sessions, as a club. And there were only 6 members or 5 members. And yet, as they go on, and the fooling around remains, but something new comes into it, which is a search for, you can call it what you like. To me, it's a music that won't be erased. It is for a language, for an American language that is so old that it will be understood long after the people who are now trying to speak it are dead. That it was there hundreds of years ago and it will be there hundreds of years from now. Whether that's true or not, I think that's the essence of the quest, to write songs and sing them as if they could have been made 100 years ago. Well, he's a great scholar. He is a great scholar of American music. In that sense, I'm simply following what he's done rather than inventing anything. A friend of mine told me a story about how a number of years ago, a new collection of recordings by Tampa Red, who was a blues guitarist from the 30s, had just been released. Was released on a Tuesday, because that's when records come out in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it included a number of songs that had never been released before, ever. And that night, Bob Dylan performed 2 of those songs at his show, wherever it was, and never again. In other words, he had heard that record that day, the day it came out, learned those songs, and performed them. So he doesn't miss anything. That means that any time there is a new discovery made about old American music, he is right on top of it. In his book, Chronicles, he talks about being in Greenwich Village in the early 60s and how you could enter a world, if you entered the world of folk music, you were entering a world of just the most outrageous characters imaginable who had been pursuing their adventures, committing their crimes, escaping from the police for hundreds of years, and they were still doing it. You know, these were people who never died, who never went away. And he says something like, you know, in 1961, in Greenwich Village, in the world where I was living, the news didn't have anything to do with President Kennedy. The real news had to do with James Garfield being assassinated because of the songs about that.
This popular culture.
Well, it's old culture, you know, it's folk culture. Sure, it's popular, but it's not disseminated through a mass media. And he talks about going into the New York Public Library and reading the newspapers that were published during the Civil War and becoming part of those events of that time. And many of the things he says about that are really quite profound, but simply the impulse to do that. I mean, you're dealing with someone who is a songwriter, who is a singer, who is a performer, but who's also a historian. That was a time, I mean, that particular day, and I don't know whether it had something to do with me or had something to do with him, that he sang so intensely or so directly that whatever he was doing was like carved in stone. You know, it was just indelible. It couldn't be erased, it couldn't be forgotten. And it wasn't like, oh, that was really interesting, I wish I could remember more about it. You know, you just remember everything. And it certainly doesn't happen every time he makes a record or performs on a stage. And like I said, it could be that it was something about my own mood that day. Don't know. You know, I think that his greatest ability, or the most magical thing about him over the years, has been an ability to embody the whole country, all parts of it, west, east, north, south, winter, summer, and you know, there are moments when that really does happen. And so he doesn't necessarily seem to come from any particular place or belong in any particular place. He's not, in my mind, and all I really mean by that is in his music, he's not specifically identified. And sometimes that can be very bad for an artist, not to have a home ground. You know, the Midwest really is the place in America that people imagine is the real America, where people are living more independently, where they're more vulnerable to the weather, where there is more of a sense of jeopardy and adventure and also boredom than in other parts of the country. But to be from the Midwest is in a way to be from the whole country. That's what I'm saying. In a way that if you're from New York, you kind of think New York is more important than the rest of the country. And if you're from California, like I am, you kind of think California is better than the rest of the country. And if you're from the Midwest, you feel you are the country. There are a lot of reasons. One is that most people who write about songs only write about words because they don't know how to write about music. It's harder to write about music. You have to think more. You have to use your imagination more. that's one reason. Another reason is that when you take a song that isn't completely obvious, where the words aren't completely obvious, and yet you understand the story that's being told, you don't need to identify all these particular characters in the song. Oh, who is the mystery tramp? And it is pointless to try and come up with a definitive explanation of words in a song, because the way they're sung, the way they are attached to melody or rhythm changes how they communicate. So that what they are on a page and what they are on the record are different things. And it's not, to me, remotely interesting to explain a song that either does or doesn't explain itself. What was interesting to me was, okay, what's the big deal about the song? Why is it so special? Why